Wow, I didn't even have to say anything. That's amazing. Oh my gosh, hi. Oh, wow. Hey, my name is Derek Sheffield, and it's my great pleasure to teach in the English department here at Wenatchee Valley College. I want to get things going today by thanking you all, first of all, for being here, and thanking the different groups who have made today possible, including the WVC Sustainability Committee, and especially Dr. Joan Causey. Where is Causey? Causey, there she is. Because I can't hang out with Jane Goodall, I hang out with Joan Causey. And you know, yeah, I mean, that's it right there. The planet, Joan is an earth warrior. Joan and Rich Peters, who is the director of our facilities here, are doing so much amazing work. I want to tell you something today as we honor Earth Day and Poetry Month, that as you came here, you passed a gigantic sequoia tree right outside these walls by the new building, Mishitwai. In the original plans for that building, Mishitwai, that tree was coming down. But then some voices spoke up, and they said, you know, that's a pretty gorgeous elder being living right there. Is there any way we can tweak things and maybe go this way a little bit and that way a little bit and let that elder being continue to be? And guess what? Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So those are the kinds of things that are happening. Those are the kinds of decisions that are happening on this campus, and that I'm so proud to be part of. My department, my dean, Andrew Hirsch Tudor, so supportive of our visiting writers program, our Northwest Nature Writing class, and many other beautiful things we're doing here. Wenatchee, Sustainable Wenatchee, the Icicle Creek Center for the Arts has been a great long-term partner. A Book for All Seasons is here. Randy, wonderful Randy. We've been partnering with A Book for All Seasons for many years on these events, and this is the first time that one of the employees, Randy in particular, said, so, hey, is there any way we can move the book table inside, because I really don't want to miss this event? And so that's what we did. We moved the books. Usually it's out on the table outside, and so thank you for that, Randy. The ASWVC provided lunch today. If you missed out on it, listen, I got to tell you, this was my first time having pozole, and I am a convert. I can't believe pozole has been dodging me all these years. It was amazing, and it's our cafeteria from scratch did it, and I hear that they make it about once a week. So you can find me in the WVC cafeteria from now on once a week. Before we turn to today's main event, I want to thank visiting poet Andrew Gottlieb for judging our Earth Day Poetry Contest. We had more submissions this year than we've ever had before, and Andy kindly read through submissions with us and chose 2 student winners, a first place and a second place poem. And right now, I want to introduce Leo Perry, whose poem was selected by Andy as the second place winner of the 2023, get it on the resume, WVC Earth Day Poetry Contest. Help me welcome Leo, please.
Hi. I've never done anything like this before, so yeah, okay. My poem's called The Fly. Sorry if I'm too loud, I guess, I don't know. I've never really paid any attention to flies, but if I were any animal, I would be a fly. I don't want to admit my resemblance to flies. They're annoying, and I get overwhelmed very easily by the monotonous buzz that their tiny bodies emit. It's too close, too loud, and too much. But I've never noticed that they rub their hands together when stationary. What I've seen are flies with their fuzzy bodies and little wings. What I didn't see is that their wings are painted with intricate designs, ones that I can only compare to fine line art. I didn't know that their fuzz looks like miniature tufts of soft cat fur, like the fur of an affectionate Maine Coon, the ones that rub their head against your hand any moment they're visible. Flies are complex and have, quote unquote, a surprising mental capacity and emotional intelligence. I wouldn't be a fly because of the movie starring Jeff Goldblum. The only media about flies is grotesque body horror, by the way, which the point of is that it violates the most fundamental piece of human existence, the body. I would be a fly because there's an unsettling relatability to them. I, too, am annoying and have a body that some view as disturbing. My likeness is also villainized like the fly is, just usually by different people. Flies aren't typically the focus of harmful lawmakers and bigoted people. Flies don't worry about violent hate crimes or deep-rooted insecurities. They don't have suffocating depressive episodes or unstable relationships. Though they might worry about their colonies, they might try to protect their young and their little fly friends. They're smart, that's for sure. Flies can process more than triple what the average human can. Even though they're nuisances, their existence is vital for ecosystems and can be used for biomedical research. I would, undoubtedly, be a fly.
Thank you, Leo.
I'm going to take a picture of you lovely humans. You fly humans.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce Isaac Day, who was awarded the first prize for the 2023 WBC Earth Day Poetry Contest. Isaac, come on up here.
Hello, everyone. Like Leo, I haven't done this before, so please forgive my nervousness. My poem is called I Met an Owl Once. Youth told me to wander, seek life's old clay, land of stories, ages told, and spoke of in hushed tones. Land of night, never end, where trees hum melodies with wind. That is where I met him. Feathers ash gray, hooked beak, coal black, sat on lowish branch of dead wood's oak. He heard my steps and turned to look. In a cold voice he spoke. Flame's child, he called me, words tinged with smoke, days old. I laughed with a new name, naive, assuming some joke. But the owl did not laugh. With eyes born of night's wisdom and grave's gray voice, he told me a man came, of how the others all burned away. When the story was told, I saw him too come ablaze. Ash, cinder, and smoke, the golden eyes of a ghost.
We have a couple of our amazingly talented artists, Cascadian artists with us today who are going to very shortly talk about their work in the book. One of the artists who could not be with us today is Emily Poole, but we figured out a way to bring her with us. My co-editor, CMarie, thought this might be a good flag for us to travel with on our book tour as we head to Ellensburg tonight, Spokane this weekend, and then on to Coeur d'Alene, Pullman, Salem, Oregon, and parts beyond, and hither and yon. So thank you, Emily Poole, for your flag. We'll have to get a poll maybe for this flag. Oh, and you know, I wanted to share with you Andy's comments about Isaac's poem that you just heard. He wrote a little blurb about that poem. I met an owl once. Stands out as a poem accomplishing quite a bit of work with just a few stanzas. Tells the story of youth's exploration and coming-of-age realization of humankind's ability to destroy. The poem holds itself tonally to the end, involving thoughtful use of assonance and a suggested rhyme scheme that exists without overwhelming the reader. The diction, too, is consistent, allowing the mix of details and abstraction to carry the reader through the allegory of the poem, along with the phrasing and suggestions of the Gothic. Something that contributes to the mood of the piece, the dark, timeless, smoky wisdom that comes when we wander and focus. Thanks again, Andy. Congratulations again, Leo and Isaac. So, Cascadia Field Guide is the result of 5 years of work. Liz, CMarie, and I sat down to make a field guide that included poems and art, and we ended up with that, but much more. The process of this collaborative book making was like writing a poem, full of discovery and delight. After we finished, we realized we had made something new. What former Oregon Poet Laureate Kim Stafford has since described as a kind of ecosystem disguised as a book, and recent MacArthur Fellow Drew Lanham has dubbed a field guide. In every way possible, this book acknowledges and enacts the agency and animacy of other beings. I have never come across a book that is so place-centered, so placid, so being-focused. As it emphasizes cohesion over division and blends poetry with Western science and with art, with traditional cultural knowledge, it invites us into a new and very old way of belonging to place. What, we might ask, does it mean to define ourselves by relationship to other beings and to our bioregion? What are the implications of that in how we conduct our living? To make our field guide for the heart, we have organized 120 beings into 13 different communities. Today we will hear stories of place, stories of being, and poetry. Thank you for being with us today. The land knows we are here. Our fellow beings somehow know we are here, celebrating them and the terrifically diverse interrelationships that make Cascadia. Oh, and booksellers know that we are here. Because as it turns out, since its release on March 1st, Cascadia Field Guide is one of the best-selling books in the region. Yeah. It's moving at about 1,000 copies a week are finding readers. We had no idea that this kind of thing was going to happen, but we are so gratified that it is, and we are so grateful that you are here with us, and we are so fortunate to have all of us together today. So I'm gonna start and read a little bit from the book. I'm gonna read a little bit about the shrub step, and then my poem for Marmot. And I thought I would start with the shrub step because that is, of course, the community that we happen to be in right now, that we are part of right now. So each community has an overview image that shows the beings in interrelationship from that community, the beings or species, and then there's an overview statement, what we like to think of as a place story, and it's what we did when selecting the most wonder and connection-inducing ecology, really, from the many sources and interviews, scientists and naturalists that we were in touch with. So here's the shrub step. Perhaps a light rain has just moved through morning skies. You close your eyes and take a deep breath, smelling the unique mix of wet rock, bunchgrass, dust, lupin, desert parsley, and everywhere the distinctive bites of sagebrush. In this wet light, you can almost feel the pores of stones opening. These moments are especially precious for their rarity. A steppe is a large area of unforested grassland, and Cascadia's shrub steppe receives less than 10 inches of rain during a typical year. But truly, this is a land of contrasts. A 100-degree day is followed by a cold night, and the next afternoon might gush with thunder showers. In summer, the wind blows hot and dusty, while winter's freezing gales swirl with snow. This near desert might appear lifeless and uniform, but as spring arrives, melting snow gives way to an incredible display of wildflowers. Lemon dabs of sagebrush buttercup, pale pinks of prairie star, purples and golds of lupin and balsam root, creamy white to rose of bitterroot, fire orange globe mallow, and every shade in between in phlox, wild onion, larkspur, and scarlet killia. As he shares stories of the time before European settlement, Okanagan tribal member Len Marchand says that, quote, grasses were belly high to a horse back then. But in the last 2 centuries, the human impact has been massive. A combination of clearing for agriculture, grazing, overgrazing, human-caused wildfires, motorized recreation, invasive species, and road building for oil, gas, and wind exploration has left only about 40% of this special biome intact. The mostly treeless shrub steppe affords expansive views across rolling hills, flats, and basaltic canyons. Even so, you might hear the clear whistles and a flute-like song before you see western meadowlark perched high on a bare and twisting trunk of big sagebrush, bill opening with each liquid note. Listen also for the rustle of grasses as pygmy shorthorned lizard crawls in search of ants. And in the night, if you're lucky, you might hear the shrill yips and cries of coyote shivering the air, and remember something you may have almost forgotten about wildness. And here's a poem. how we look. Fur fat and stock still in the trail, they appear to be looking into a mythic sky, posed for a feral portrait, or a wish to draw us closer before they turn and level a frontal marmot scrutiny. The way their noses aim askance says they're not here, or we are gone, or we are here, but they're not sure. Upright on boulders, they are ready to tumble at the shrill signal if we become, in a blink, by sneeze or shuffle, believable. Our pack-heavy shapes gathered in their sky look up to Shuckson. How distant and present it juts, how sharp a lookout. Clarity we envy through tilted glass until, from every nowhere, the whiteout. When the peak disappears, we turn and labor down the moraine, switchbacking like mules silently spaced in the falling snow. While we drive our miles and climb to bright rooms, they settle below in a general huddle, slowing for their long dream. Between one flake and the infinite next, one pulse beat and the second, our burdened forms waver and loom, weave, and are gone. It is, It is now my pleasure to introduce my fellow co-editor, Liz Bradfield.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right. It's such a pleasure to be here and to hear those amazing poems. Thank you both. I'll never think of owls and flies quite the same way again. And I'm really excited to get to hear from the other editors and poets and artists of Cascadia here today. I'm going to focus on the coastal urban woods community. How many of you have met the Madrona before? Yeah. I don't say Madrone. I grew up saying Madrona, and I'm going to stick with it. This is a being that I love really dearly. And as Derek was explaining, we have these 13 communities and poems, art, and being stories for each of the 128 beings. And I was talking to my dad the other day, who grew up in Seattle and on Vashon Island. His parents grew up in Seattle. His grandmother grew up in Tacoma. And he was saying, I just learned so much about things I've been walking on all my life. He raised a naturalist as a daughter. He didn't know it. He didn't have that in himself. He's like, the banana slug. I was like, I know, Dad. I know. He's like, they're amazing. So it's such a joy to know that this book is bringing people closer into places that they've loved in other ways and opening new ways of loving place. So I'm going to read the being story for Pacific Madrona, and then a poem about Madrona that was published in my first book, Interpretive Work. And there'll be some repeated information, but I think that's all right. Pacific Madrona. Madrona's skin, smooth and bright chartreuse when young, then aging to a brittle cinnamon red that curls from their trunk in delicate papers perfect for writing secret notes, is unmistakable. This tree's white, urn-shaped flowers hang in large, drooping sprays that, in fall, become bumpy orange-red berries prized by robin, cedar waxwing, varied thrush, and quail. People find Madrona's berries bitter, though they can be used as bait for steelhead, perhaps because of their resemblance to fish roe. Also called madrone, madroño, and arbutus, Madrona grows as tall as a 3-story building and bears evergreen leaves that are oval, shiny, and dark. No wonder Madrona was mistaken by interloper George Vancouver as magnolia. In fact, madrona is the only broadleaf evergreen native to Cascadia and is North America's most northerly broadleaf evergreen. Madrona does shed their leaves, but not all at once, bit by bit, like Sitka spruce or Douglas fir. Madrona grows along the coast from southern British Columbia to San Diego, tolerating a wide range of temperatures and rainfall. You think madrona is hardy? Think again. Although tough in their ideal conditions, this tree is fragile outside them. It turns out madrona's health is incompatible with modern human land development, such as pavement and lawns. Madrona likes sunny, well-drained areas and is fire adapted, resprouting quickly after a burn. Notoriously difficult to transplant, most likely because of their critical relationship with mycorrhizal fungi. Madrona resists human interference, so we must learn about their historic ecology in order to nurture them now. Some people call madrona the refrigerator tree because the trunk is always, even in the height of summer, cool. Straits Salish tribes say that survivors of the Great Flood anchored their canoe to madrona at the mountaintop, and in gratitude for madrona's help, they do not use the wood as fuel. The tree is sacred. And here's the poem, which, like a lot of my poems, is a little bit sweet and a little bit cranky. Succession. In the neighborhood called Magnolia, they've planted magnolia trees to right an old mistake made when George Vancouver's crew saw thick-leaved madronas on bluffs over Elliott Bay and misnamed them. Magnolia trees outside the coffee shop, magnolia trees. Native to this continent, but not its northwest coast, land of cedar and salal. They are leafed out, staked up witness to our desire for truth-making. Outside the post office on Magnolia, magnolias. Magnolias glossy and tended by the antique store, fenced in the sidewalk by the bus stop. Meanwhile, the madronas, whose peeling trunks, burnt orange and sleek, colors layering from Granny Smith to pomegranate, papery with curls I've peeled and scrawled here since the last glaciation, slow growing and picky, waste away in neighborhood parks while beautification committees worry and try, unable to hear what for madronas is truth. What the tree wants is burning, to burn among huckleberry and Oregon grape, then bud from the leftover roots. Moldered by lawn and dogs and all we've brought with us to make things nice. The madronas wait for lightning, for some untended spark to argue their need against our clipped and tended ideas of care. Well, we will advance to the next slide when I walk back to the computer, but now I want to introduce the artist for the Coastal Urban Woods community, Sarah Van Sanden, whose art you see here for the madrona. And here's the overview image for Coastal Urban Woods community. Sarah is an artist, a designer, a landscape architect based in Seattle, Washington. She studied art and ethnobotany at the University of Washington, went on to do graduate work at Harvard, and is now back home in Seattle, creating plant-based spaces and environments that help people connect to the more than human world. She also happens to be one of my oldest and dearest friends, and I don't know, many of you might have had the beautiful experience of waking up older and looking around and saying, oh my God, these people I love are so talented and they're so amazing. And that's how I feel about Sarah. I'm very excited to hear her share her work with you.
Wow, Liz, thank you. The feeling is mutual. I'm really honored to be here in this gathering, celebrating this incredible book, and to have a chance to show my work in a different way than I usually do. So, and also I want to thank you, CMarie and Derek. This is really a fantastic opportunity. the overview for coastal urban woods. To stand in the coastal urban woods of Cascadia is to stand in two worlds. In one, the roads, strip malls, and skyscrapers of the built world, threaded by medians, parks, and yards. And in the other, a wild tangle of sword fern and salal still towered by red cedar and buzzed by mason bee in secret nooks and crannies. For many Cascadians, this is where a connection to the non-human world begins. Styler's Jay, bright and alert as any city kid, hops among the peeling branches of shoreside madrona, maybe sussing out the developing berries, maybe just curious, in a particular corvid way. At night, mostly unnoticed, small mountain beaver emerges from an intricate system of burrows to forage, perhaps seeking young vine maple, a favorite food, though they must be careful of barred owl swooping down from above or coyote padding the now quiet greenways. Wild beings still thrive here in the coastal urban woods, linking cities and suburbs to the places that existed long before the first windowsills or paved driveway. Take a moment, stand on a curb near the edge of a vacant lot or ravine. There are so many lives going on above and below you in the shadows of branches, yearning as branches toward light. So just to talk about my work a tiny bit, I am so much oriented to this world through plants. Might seem a little trite to say in this company, but plants are how I relate to the world. They're how I start conversations with people, what I notice the first thing when I get up in the morning, and they're fundamental to how I earn my living. So representing them for the Cascadia Field Guide offered me a chance to dive a little deeper and look at a new sort of intimacy with these sort of familiar friends that I've returned to the same place over the course of days or weeks to watch leaf out, and over the course of seasons and years to grow and sometimes die. Particularly for the trees, the complexities in my mind demanded a collapsing of multiple scales and moments in their life cycles into a single composition. And unlike the plants, which are mostly stationary beings that have been chosen for the urban coastal woods community for the Cascadia Field Guide, the animal beings, to me, are a little bit more mysterious, often darting through my field of vision or only making themselves known through sound or persistent digging, or the pollination of beloved flowers. Mountain beaver, for example, has only made itself visible to me one incredible time in Carkeek Park in Seattle. That was magic. In the cases of both flora and fauna, committing to the medium of cut paper meant committing to the strengths and limitations of the medium, figuring out how thin a branch could be or how long a whisker, and how much complex curvature I could achieve in a small stretch of cut. And in the process of cutting, I'd be so focused on minuscule details that I was often surprised when I stepped back and I saw the final composition, instead of just a jumble of bumps and points. And ultimately, I chose, I think it's important to say that I chose to let the images sort of sing together in a more manneristic way than to adhere to scientific accuracy. So you'll notice that the scales on the western red cedar, for example, are not opposite. They're alternating, but in reality, they're opposite. It became more important to me to be expressive in a big way. And it was also interesting to see how similar representation strategies appeared over time. Again, the scales of the western red cedar and the little antennae on the blue orchard mason bee. And then at other times, there was so much more divergence in representational style. The jagged line work on the madrona versus the fluidity that you can see in the leaf margin of the vine maple. So really now it's just exciting to see how these images are again, interplaying and sometimes diverging with the rest of the beings in the Cascadia Field Guide, taking on new life and new relationships. relationships. Thank you so much for letting me speak. And up next is Andrew Gottlieb.
Hey, everyone. It's fantastic to be here, and CMarie and Derek and Liz, thanks for this incredible book that is superlative in its being and nature. I'm going to read about West Slope cutthroat trout, a favorite. I love to fish and fly fish, and so it was really fun to be able to contribute to this anthology about one of our best trout. West Slope cutthroat trout, I'm going to take a stab at the Latin, Oncorhynchus clarki lewisi. To hold West Slope cutthroat trout in your hands is to hold a dream of clear, fast water, winters in deep lakes, and the secrets of headwaters where this being often lives. Perhaps this is whom the trout lily is named for. Their spring spawning is a gift for predators and those of us who spend long afternoons lying on the shores of perennial streams with the hope of glimpsing a spawning West Slope. And to see one is fortunate indeed. The introduction of kokanee, lake trout, and whitefish into Cascadia has been great for sport fishing, but disastrous for West Slope. Their numbers have decreased by 90% or more. And it's not just the competition. Livestock, grazing, agriculture, logging, road building, mining, and dam construction reduce the number of spawning cutthroat each year. In fact, this being, who can live in rivers or lakes or migrate between both, inhabits only 59% of their historical range. West Slope cutthroat makes up in splendor what they lack in size. In fact, a West Slope over 5 pounds is extremely rare. Not a pescatarian like other trout, this being prefers a diet of aquatic invertebrates, think worms and bugs. One of the wonders of the West Slope is the glorious color they display as a juvenile. Belly, a sunset blush of crimson, transitioning into an upside-down sunrise that spills into a chartreuse meadow dappled with black spots. Rose moles all in stipple, as Gerard Manley Hopkins writes. Oh, West Slope cutthroat, we will never get enough of you. And now I'll read my poem called The Walking Gods. The weight of the descending flow, cold, heavy, dedicated to places downstream, confronts you while you stare alone for giant cutthroat, mythic in the deepest pools. There are gods in these woods, walking slopes and meadows, the weight of seasoned legs plunging spongy hole to hole. A river never forgives, never compromises its vision. The biggest boulders thunder as they trundle on the bottom. Deep in the old growth, there's a presence, a recent breath, the deepest scent on rocks, left traced by the navigation of mosses. A walking stick and a steady step prevent accidental drowning. The river's intimate tug presses its indifferent love like a rope. Elsewhere, the tall gods bustle. One stubborn bowl leans over, like the oldest, strictest teacher. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Jack Johnson, Cascadian poet and naturalist. Come on up, Jack.
So I live in the pine forest. And that's my bee. Western rattlesnake. In Esper's tradition, a charm against evil is invoked by placing a wishpus head on hot coals in the earth and covering it with fresh liver and gall from other wild beings. During the steaming, the liver is thought to absorb venom from the head, which is then carried as a talisman. But it is not the head we usually think of when we think of the western rattlesnake. Many traditions, myths, and beliefs center around this being, whose tail is often a charm and bite is often deadly. Though the hinged fangs carry a deadly venom, the tail is surprisingly empty. Instead of functioning like a maraca to make its namesake sound, the outer shell of the rattle, made of keratin, click together. Special shaker muscles in the tail allow the tip to vibrate up to 90 times per second. Though this rattle often evokes fear, as it should, rattlesnake wants to avoid conflict. They are generally quite docile and run or slither from you as quickly as you do from them. Though most of what we think about when rattlesnake comes to mind is sound and bite, it is actually smell that is their strongest sensory organ. Those nostrils are great for breathing, but that split tongue does the smelling, almost. It reaches out and grabs molecules from the air and brings them to snakes' Jacobson's organ, a chemoreceptor located in the nasal cavity. This organ helps decode the molecules into smells. Rattlesnake, who can live up to 20 years, has few natural predators, but they have long been persecuted by humans. The poem that was inspired by this being is called Leaving the Garden. When a great northern swallows the tracks, we work in the garden without talking. We leave our weed pulling to walk the fire trail to the river. A car's wheels hiss up Derby Canyon. The Wenatchee crawls below the rail bed, makes toward the Columbia. We glimpse an osprey overhead and try to spot a catbird meowing high in pine branches. We hear quail rattle the wild roses, the snowberries. So, he sees us before we see him, a brown and yellow spotted snake, his flat head balanced above his tail, the sudden rattle, a rainbird sprinkler striking 10. All things move in coils, in smooth roots and yellow grass. The sky disappears. Thank you. And our next reader is editor and poet, CMarie Fuhrman.
Hello. I woke up yesterday morning in the Montaigne, and I said, "Tats me we me him kotsi yao yao," and I drove down from that Montaigne through the pine forest, and I said, "Tats lehin kotsi yao yao we me him." Good afternoon, my relative. Thank you. And this morning I woke up and I was near the Clearwater River, in the Eastern Rivers portion of Cascadia, and I said, "Tats me we me him kotsi yao yao." Good morning, my relative. Thank you so much. And driving up here today, I saw balsam root arrowleaf, and all I wanted to do was get out and lay with them and see that yellow again, because I've seen white now for about 9 months. But I said, Kotsi Yao Yao to the arrow leaf, just as the snow, because we know snow becomes water for salmon. And I got to pass so many young salmon coming up. And here I am now, in front of all of you, and what a blessing that is. And so I say, Tatslehin Kotsi Yao Yao Wimihem. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here, my relatives. Would you like to say Kotsi Yao Yao with me? Yeah. It's great, because we're all in the same land. That's Nimi Putimt, and that language has been here for over 16,000 years. You want to try it? I'll say it, and then you say it. Kotsi Yao Yao. Ready? Kotsi Yao Yao. Perfect. Right now, the trees out there are wagging. The birds are singing a little louder. Thank you so much. I'm going to read about cryptobiotic soil. And in case you don't know what that is, hopefully this will help out a little bit. There are many reasons to tread with care in the shrub steppe. One of them is cryptobiotic soil, whose name means hidden life. If you are lucky enough to encounter this being, which is typically darker than the surrounding soil and bumpy looking, kneel next to it, but carefully, for a close look, and imagine the wonder of seeing 1,000-year-old Sitka spruce in Cascadia's temperate rainforest. This elder being you are in the company of might be 5 times as ancient, maybe more. Cryptobiotic soil, also known as cryptogamic crust and biological soil crust, is as vulnerable as they are venerable. One errant foot or hoof step may take a century to repair. A special collective of lichens, cyanobacteria, mosses, fungi, and algae, cryptobiotic crust is vitally important in that they add nutrients to the soil and protect it from erosion. Imagine what all that prairie wind would do were it not for the anchoring grace of this being. I love thinking of a saying by the Haida culture that says, "Be careful how you step, the earth is watching you." And cryptobiotic crust is actually doing that. I wrote this poem for the cryptobiotic soil called the Cryptobiotic Sonnet. If you don't know what a sonnet is, look it up and then try one. They're quite fun to write. The ashes of my beloved tasted like nothing, and swallowing them didn't bring him back. They still feel warm, my mother said, as we fed him to the river. He and I were pregnant then, but I bled the unknowable into soil. There were no songs. I often walked the desert looking for proof of my ancestors. I once found a Clovis point, unbroken by years, cattle hooves, or floods, an icicle with an amber heart and tip dipped in blood. I felt only its primeval edge when I pressed it to my tongue. I buried the artifice in soil, whose name means hidden life, an ancient skin which binds together the dead in layers to hold new lives. I'll be dead before the scar I made heals by the beautiful work of rot, which I carry now beneath my fingernails, like 10 black and waning moons. It's my pleasure now to introduce Justin Gibbens, who's not only the artist for our Eastern Rivers section of the book, but also for the cover of the book. Please help me welcome Justin.
Hi there. Well, I'd be remiss if I, again, didn't thank you, Derek, CMarie, and Liz for just such a tremendous book. And I think I honestly can't think of a better way to commemorate Earth Day than to celebrate the publication of this book, Cascadia. So, thank you. Yeah. I want to tell you a little bit about my approach to developing these illustrations, but before I do so, I will read the overview of the community that I was tasked with, Eastern Rivers. Eastern Rivers. Say you are the golden leaf of black cottonwood. A fall breeze pulls you from the limb, and you sashay through the cool air and land in a river. Maybe it's the Snake River, maybe the Salmon, or perhaps the mighty Columbia. Whichever the river, it carries you on its slower moving water through a land that has sustained people for thousands of years. As you rock gently on the water, you look below to see a flash of crimson Chinook salmon moving in the opposite direction, heading home to make her red. And then, looking up, another crimson, this of red osier dogwood leaning toward the water as if looking at you. On this journey of hundreds of miles, you glide over juvenile Idaho giant salamander, but only as you pass through Idaho. Caddisfly larvae will be scraping their way along the river's bottom. At the same time, western ridged mussel will be doing the kind work of cleaning the river's water. And you'll hear the song of chukar and the whispers of humans walking the banks in awe of the beautiful canyons and drainages through which the eastern rivers of Cascadia flow. Dipper will tickle the stream. Pack rat will take a nighttime sip. And with a breeze, seeds of the ever-important biscuit root will join you on the journey. Just like the sun runs over the backs of the Salmon River Mountains, so shall your imagination run the ridges of the white sturgeon before drifting into open sea. Eventually, as Norman MacLean writes, all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. And so it is for Cascadia. The Eastern Rivers community is the network of veins carrying life to and from and around Cascadia. To know these river communities is to know much about how to be, who to be, and how to thrive within them. Thank you. A very nice passage. I can't claim it as my own. Who wrote that one? That was beautiful, really. So yeah, about my work. As a wildlife artist and illustrator, I create images of critters that share this space with us. Creatures that scamper and poke about in the undergrowth, that slither in the thickets, and that swoop and soar through the skies above. I grew up drawing the boyhood standards: dinosaurs, creepy crawlers, aliens from a galaxy far, far away. Eventually, I went to art school. I studied fine line painting in China for a spell, and I ended up earning a scientific illustration certificate at the University of Washington. And these things have all coalesced in my studio practice, where I primarily use ink and watercolor and brush to depict images of both the familiar and the not so familiar inhabitants that share this planet with us. So I was honored to be invited to contribute to this project. Derek, I think you were the one that first reached out to me, and I believe it was through email, and side story, you included the community that I would be illustrating, and it was the shrub step. And I thought, well, I can't say no to this now. I've lived in Washington my entire life on the eastern side. This is my home. I live in the shrub step. Of course I'm going to do this. And then Derek said, oops, I was cutting and pasting. You're not getting the shrub step. You're getting Eastern Rivers. Idaho? Thanks. But it was an honor to do it, nevertheless. So realizing this was not going to be your typical field guide, I knew that there would be a little more creative license with the task at hand. As a scientific illustrator, traditionally your job is to visually distill the very critical, most important information of a specimen as clearly as is possible, and only revealing the most essential and necessary bits of information. But knowing this book was going to take more of a sideways approach to the subjects, I opted to use watercolor and ink washes to create images that were a bit more subtle, nuanced, and in some cases abstracted. I felt that these images would operate most effectively if they complemented the written text without being too explicitly rendered. Knowing that these illustrations would be sharing space on a page with poems about the species, I wanted my images to, in effect, be poetic in nature. As I understand it, creative writing of this sort relies much on the reader's imagination to fill in those proverbial blanks. And I wanted to do the same with my illustrations. As with music, it isn't so much about the notes that are played, but rather the rests. So here we are, the American Dipper. This is one of the illustrations within the Eastern River community. This presented a fun challenge because the bird in and of itself is not particularly remarkable. If you've seen the bird, it's a small, grayish songbird, but it's more the behavior that we find so compelling. So capturing a moment mid-dip allowed me to explore the form of the bird from both above and below the water's surface. And it seems to be a nice metaphor for how a reader, or rather, it seems to be a nice metaphor for how one might engage with the text. And it's the delicious interplay between both the literal descriptions and the more abstract or figurative lines of the poem that maybe inspired this direction with this piece. I was also interested in capturing the reflection of motion within the dipper and the turbulence of the water. And as with other illustrations, I wanted to strike that balance between positive and negative space, between the concrete and that which is implied. And as an aside, I was really tickled to find out that the poem that was selected for this bird, the American Dipper, is a poem by the poet Gary Snyder, and he's really one of my all-time favorite poets. And I think it's also worth mentioning, as a contributing artist, I had complete freedom to take the illustrations wherever I wanted to go with them. And though some of the text was probably shared early on, this was in no way was it shared with any kind of expectation that we were simply to be depicting the text that was provided to us. It was just meant as a jumping off point. And so that was really liberating to hear that, though I've said this before, sometimes it's nice to just be told what to do. But in any case, jump I did. So thank you very much.
Yeah, he didn't really jump, actually. It was great. I got to tell a story on him because he told one on me. So we had, and I want to thank Scott Bailey, our very own art professor here, the head of our art program, who, highly recommended Justin and said, you've got to get him in this book. And so thank you, Scott. And so we looked at Justin's work online, and we were like oohing and ahhing over it, and we said, oh, hey, would you do one like in the style of this show that you did? And that's what we'd love you to do them in that style right there. And I get this, and no, this was a phone conversation, and Justin's like, yeah, no. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I've already done that. So I'm interested in doing some new things. Okay? You know, Justin, just do whatever you want, okay? We'll love it. And then recently, I asked through his wife, I said, hey, Renee, can you try to get Justin to give me a discount on the Dipper, on the original piece for the Dipper? And I hear yelling from across the house, no way! So I like that. Listen, thank you so much for being with us today. I think maybe you can tell how much joy is spilling out of us to be with you here and share what we've been working on for so long. Listen, I think what a good plan would be is there is a table right outside those doors, and we should go sit at that table, all of us poets and artists, and sit there, and then if you would like to get your book signed while we're here, we will do that. But you don't have to get it signed, you know, whatever. I mean, you have to have a book. You can't leave here without a book. So if you haven't got one yet, there are a few left. So that's what we're gonna do. And I guess I would just say a final thing here, that this book, what made me feel semi-qualified to be a small part of this book was my long-time relationship with Dr. Dan Stevens, who's right here in the front row, one of our most beloved professors, who's, I hate to say it, isn't going to be here at the college much longer. He's maybe another year, maybe not. We'll see. He's thinking about it. So he's looking for another adventure. But he and I have been so fortunate, thanks to the support of people like Andrew Hirsch Tudor. Oh my gosh, my doctor is here. Oh, I just noticed that. Hi, doctor. But thanks to the people like Andrew Hirsch Tudor, we have been able to, since 2005, maybe 14 or 15 times, we've been able to offer a very special learning community called Northwest Nature Writing that blends the study of writing with ecology. And that is what this book is, and more, too. So this is a man I really love, and I'm sorry to get emotional, but it's going to be hard to see him go. I've realized that that class and all of our students, the community of our students, we have our students here with us today, it's one of the just great blessings of my teaching career, and it feels like it's culminating in this book. So thank you so much. Maybe we'll see you out there.